he's not the best. He's got to be the best in the world. I mean, I haven't seen anything like it. And I probably won't see anything like tonight again until he comes back. But everybody have a great time. Here's Doyle Dykes.
Thank you so much. And this week, of course, being the anniversary of tragedy of 9/11, it's just really had me thinking about a lot of things. And I passed a lot of the overpasses rather today that I went under had flags all over them again, just like they did a couple of years ago, and it just makes you feel good about still living and being a part of a great nation as we are. And I was in Honolulu a couple of weeks ago. I went to Pearl Harbor. I always wanted to do that. Never experienced that. I'll never forget that. And a few years ago, I went over to Hiroshima with Dave. David and I saw the melted tricycles and bicycles and the dome where the ground zero was during that time in World War II. And I said, well, I'm going to go see the beginning of it. And I saw it, Pearl Harbor. And I saw the drops of oil coming up, lurking their way up from the bottom of the sea. And old battleship, the Arizona, as it still is a resting place of over 900 soldiers, almost 1,000 of our personnel. And almost like it's the blood of those soldiers coming up saying, don't forget, remember. See? And not to start off such a serious thing, but the cool thing about that is I'm going to Japan next week. And I'll get up and pick with a lot of those guys. There's some great musicians over there. And so just see how time changes things and forgiveness and what can happen even though there's war. And I'll walk down the streets with my guitar in my hand. Not literally playing. Maybe I'll do that someday. I don't know, but I'll be playing over there. And there are a lot of great players over there. In fact, there's one young guy that plays a lot of Django Reinhardt stuff. His name is Massa. And he'll be, I wrote a song called Martha's Kitchen. I might do it for you tonight. But when he plays rhythm, you know. That kind of stuff. And so instead of calling it Martha's Kitchen, I call it Massa's Kitchen when he plays. And I told somebody who knows, maybe we'll walk down the streets of Baghdad one day with our guitars in our hands. And I hope that'll happen. I think it will. That'd be a great thing. But anyway, how are you folks doing up here? I'll do something really serious for you. A song that I take very serious. I wrote this one in my garage one night. Just me and you and the guitar. Me and Jesus and my old guitar. Me and Jesus and my old guitar. and Joe, and my guitar. A little bit. Country Fried Pickin'. I was talking to Wayne Eddy this week, and on my way home from the airport the other night, and he kept me between my daughter and Dwayne, and between Heidi and Dwayne, there was like a 5-minute lag, and that was only because my cell phone quit. You know. Ooh. I'll find a way to drive you crazy. Ooh. Thank you, Chris. Anyway, I wrote a little tune for Dwayne. Let's see. His part. That's Dwayne's part. Y'all remember Dwayne Eddy, don't you? So anyway, I wrote a song. I said, Dwayne, I wrote a song for you. And he, it's called Dwayne Thing. Oh, I'm sure it's great. No, I want you to hear it before I go in and record it. No, I'm sure it's great. Just what time you want me to be at the studio? I'll have my guitar. And he played on it. I said, I can't afford Dwayne, Eddie. I said, well, I volunteer. You can now. And he played on the record. Can you believe that? Yeah, he is a hero, man. Y'all know I used to, some of y'all know. How many never seen me before? It's your first time ever seeing, where have y'all been? I thought I covered this area up here, and because I know a lot of y'all, you're not, just from here. You're from everywhere, aren't you? Really, aren't you? Where are you from? How many drove 100 miles to get here? Did y'all drive? How far did y'all drive? 120 miles? Anybody else drive 120 miles? How far did you drive? 120 miles. Give them a CD of some kind. And if you would, I'll do a. Thank you very much. There's a song called Zacchaeus, or Zacchaeus, or Zacchaeus. I asked him last night. I was at a Baptist church in Birmingham, Alabama, and I said, "Is it Zacchaeus or Zacchaeus?" And I said, "Which one is it?" And they all just blurted out something. They were all different. It sounded like to me. So, he really cares. He's a little guy that climbed the tree. So I wrote that years ago back when I was with Grandpa Jones. And Grandpa would come up to me after our show and well, he said it was a good show. He said, "You gonna go home, or you gonna stick around?" And I said, "I think I'm just going to stick around." "Well, I'll see you next Saturday night." And he'd leave. And I'd stay and I'd watch every act, and I'd just stand there. And I still love to do that. I love going to the opera. I was there 2 weeks ago. Saturday night I was on Grand Ole Opry. And I still love to sing. But back in those days, it was still, I mean, a lot of people are still there. Some same people. Feels the same in a lot of ways. Except I have a lot nicer parking space than I used to have when I was at Grand Lock. Money's not different, but it's much different. But you don't do the Grand Locker for that. It's one of those things where it's a part of our musical heritage, and it's one of those things where you just love being there. And so I would watch back in those days in the 70s, Roy Acuff and the Smoky Mountain Boys, and I'd watch people like Hank Snow and Marty Robbins. And Marty would do a whole show sometimes. They'd put him on at the end, and sometimes I saw him get 90 minutes one night. Nobody cared. They finally just cut him off and the radio, and he just kept going because he didn't care. Radio or not, he just had the crowd. There were 6,000 people there to see, mostly to see him, I think. It was amazing. And Minnie Pearl, of course, Grandpa Jones. And back in those days, they didn't get up and say, well, here's my latest hit on Billboard. They didn't have Billboard back in Roy's day, Roy Acuff, And so he'd get up and he'd take his old fiddle and somehow he'd hook it onto his bow, and it was an old fiddle made in the 1700s. He'd put it on his nose like that, and he'd go like this, and he'd do yo-yo tricks. And while the dobro player was taking a break on the dobro. And that's what they did. And you don't see Tim McGraw doing that. I guess he doesn't have to, but I mean, it's a different day, It's a different time. And it was almost like country where vaudeville kind of meets Grand Ole Opry, and they still had that. And Bashful Brother Oswald, the dobro player, he'd come out in his overalls and his whole hat. And he, one time, I saw him, they were pushing this old wash tub out there. I thought, what are they doing now, And they'd sing a song, and then during the commercial break, Roy's up there doing yo-yo tricks or his the stuff with the fiddle. And Bashful Brother Oswald, he'd be over in the corner, he'd do this, and he'd take his old jug that said XXX on it, and he'd turn it up like that. And somebody nudged Roy Acuff, and he's like, and he'd go, you can't drink that on the Grand Ole Opry. Now, this was during the commercial break, so you didn't hear it on the radio. And he'd spit that out. He'd slap him on the back, and he'd in that bucket, and it just blew up. I mean, like a bomb exploded. And you wouldn't do that today. I mean, that's politically incorrect, it'd scare the daylights out of people. But back in you thought Kiss had the first flash pops, but it was Roy Acuff and Smoky Mountain Boys. I couldn't believe that. It's the first time I ever saw anything like that. And so it goes way back, and they would do songs. Oh,
about
Give me that
turning your
fifth
radio
string.
on?
Oh, shouldn't do that here in Pennsylvania, should they? Need to play that on the orange guitar, don't I? For UT. Anyway. I made a mess of it, but I'll try it. I gave it a try.
Hey, Doyle.
Yes, sir.
I wish I got this live. You
Yes,
play
sir.
Robert Cupid's live.
No, I hadn't played it in a long time. I'll try it on something here.
Will?
You play that, Joe?
That's
Love will keep us alive?
No, but I think that since the surgery, that song's been an inspiration. It's been a lot of awesome.
I haven't played that in a long time. Let me see what I can do with it. My tune is all messed up right now. Well, I've written quite a few songs, and a lot of them, some are written out of real happy times, and sometimes they're written out of trials, you know. But if it's a trial to me, it's that I turn the desperation into thanksgiving, and I just begin to say, well, thank you, Lord, for helping us with this. Such as it was when I've learned to say thanks a lot of times before you see, you know, whatever you're needing. So it was back a few years ago. And it was in Dallas, Texas, yeah. It was in a Holiday Inn. And I was praying for my kids to go to college, and Heidi wanted to be a nurse, and I didn't have the money to send her to the school she wanted to go to. And Holly was starting the next semester as well, so it was time to pray. And I did, and I read the Bible, and I did, closed it. And then I grabbed my guitar, and I thought, well, it's just time to play and to say thanks.
Yes.
And he showed up. Call it visitation. I was on the operator right after that, and a man walked up to me and he says, I don't know why I don't know you, but I believe God wants me to be your friend. And I said, okay, I'll be your friend. I don't know, in jean skirt, wasn't in sandals, wasn't dressed to be on the stage of the opera. And I said, Haley, I want you to sing. Those kids would say, Dad, don't do that to me. 6,000 people standing there. She says, oh, thank you, Dad. She got out and she sang, and it touched that guy. And he says, I want to know who you are. And he told me he lived right across the street from Chet Atkins and used to walk every morning with Chet. And we talked about things. And he told me about a lot of sort of simple, secretive type things about Chet maybe, but it was fun. I'm not so secret, but Chet never was real open about his faith. But he was to this man for some reason. They were good friends. And he says, he called me. He wrote down our family's names and he said, I want to put you on a list and I'll call your name out when I pray. And he called me and he says, I'm missing one. I said, and he said, I got Holly and Haley and Caleb. Those are our kids. But there's another one. I said, that's Heidi. He says, Heidi, that's it. And he said, when can I meet Heidi? I said, well, she's in town. He lived in Nashville. We live 2 hours away now. And I said, she wants to go to college up there, so she's up to see if she can get a job and all that. And so I said, she went to a mall to see if she could get a job at a mall and in a daycare center. And he said, well, have her come by and see me before she leaves town. So I did, and he says, just ask for me. Everybody knows where I am at the hospital. And it was at a hospital. And so the next morning, I told Heidi to do that, and she says, okay, Dad. So the next morning, Heidi woke me up early. She must have gotten up at 3 o'clock to leave Nashville to come home and wake me up that early. What is it, Heidi? She says, Dad, you know who that guy is? And he has a whole wing named after him at that hospital. I said, really? And he said, he hired me. Doing what? Being a nurse. I said, he hadn't even started school yet. I know, ain't that cool? I said, and then she just started squalling. I mean, just started crying. She couldn't even hardly talk. And I said, what is it, Heidi? What's wrong? She said, Dad, he's paying my college $60,000. You don't have to worry about it anymore. That happened.
Thank you, Jesus.
So why are you saying all these things? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you do. I don't know. But this is where my music comes from. When Heidi was 4 years old, and Holly was 2, they were the only kids we had back when I was just a young dad in 1980. And I came in off a trip and my wife met me at the door. My wife and I, we were high school sweethearts. We've been married 2 weeks ago tonight. 30 years.
Yeah.
I said, honey, we've been married, we've been together 30 years. And I said, I think we've been together 10. It's just, maybe that's our secret. And I said, I just bought a new life insurance policy. And bought a new house, a new truck. And I said, if anything happened to me, would you get married again? Oh, I don't like to talk about things. Oh, I wouldn't talk about it. I reckon I would. You would? Would you let him drive my truck? Well, you wouldn't have any use for it.
That's practical.
Would you let him live in our new house? It's just a house, Doyle. It's just a house. I was getting serious. I said, Rita, you wouldn't let him pick my guitars now, would you? Oh no, I couldn't do that. He's left-handed. I cried about that for 2 weeks. But I came in off that trip in 1980, and my high school little cheerleader, sweetheart, Rita, met me at the door. She says, good night, they're yours, have fun, I'm going to bed. I looked at our girls, Heidi and Holly, I said, y'all want to play? We played till about 2:30 in the morning. Finally put them to bed, and I said a little prayer with them at bedtime. Bedtime. It's Nashville musician hours. I didn't know any better. Didn't have to get up and go to school or anything. And so Holly fell asleep before we even finished the prayer. But Heidi was wide awake, and we just said a little memorized poem prayer that night because it was so late. But I felt kind of bad because I kept looking at at Heidi as I'd already kissed her goodnight and walked away from a little twin bed. You see, they shared a room. And then I looked back and I said, Heidi, go to sleep. And she says, she sat there and looked at me, and I walked back and I said, was there something maybe special you want to ask God? There's something I've been thinking about. I thought, what does a 4-year-old think about? And she says, I'd like to have a rose of my own. I've never had one. I've always wanted one. I thought all those years, 4. She said, do you think God would bring me one? I said, well, what do you think? She says, I think God can do anything, Daddy. And so we asked God for a rose, and I thought, wow, I wish that was all I had to believe for tonight. I had so many big things on my mind. I still remember what they were. And I forgot about her rose. And the next night, at that same little prayer time, not quite as late, but I walked over to her bed and I said, well, let's pray. And I joined her little hand, and suddenly her little lips puffed up, and she got quivery, and she got all teary-eyed. And I said, well, what's wrong? And she says, do you think he forgot to bring my rose to me today? And what do you say? And she said, how come God didn't bring my rose to me, Daddy? And I didn't know what to say. I said, well, you don't say in his time, if it be his will. She's 4, you don't say. And so I said, we didn't mention the color. Did he need to know that? Maybe he did. And so she says, I always wanted a white one. She said, we better ask him again. And she stuck her little chubby hand out. And we asked God for a white rose for Heidi. And I couldn't sleep thinking about it. I finally got up the next day and I thought, I could call the florist down the street. Or I had a friend who could drop one by. And I knew he would have. But that's plan B. Y'all ever think of plan B? In case he doesn't come across one. Help him out a little bit.
Come on.
I was wanting to help him out. But then I thought, well, she'd know the difference too. And so I didn't do that. I went to this little place. It was in the church, actually. And there were these people that I knew. I did a concert there. And I thought everyone had left. After my concert, a lady walked up in the middle aisle. She says, are you Doyle Dykes? I thought, well, that's nice. After your concert. And I started saying, lady, I know I'm internationally unknown, but I mean... So she said, well, God told me to bring you something from my garden today. And the way she walked and carried herself and the way she was holding this little package. And I kept looking at her. I said, God did. He told you. And because I'd stopped what I was doing, And she says, he did. I was in my garden and God told me to bring this to Doyle Dykes. And I said, well, that's me. And she walked up. She handed it to me. I said, well, I'll sure enjoy eating this from your garden. I thought it was a carrot or something. I guess it's a guy thing. We always think of food. She says, well, I don't think you should eat that. You better look at it. You see, she was maybe in her 30s or 40s. It's hard to tell because she was 6. She was special. And I said, okay. And she told me to look at it. And she's standing there watching me. And I peel the aluminum foil back, and when I saw that first little rose petal, and I saw that, and I shut it, the little package, and I thought, oh God, because two things, I'm holding a little miracle in my hand. The second thing is I felt very ashamed because I wouldn't have chosen her to bring it. And I felt very ashamed of that. We sum people up a lot of times by the way they look or what they, you know what I'm saying. And so I would have maybe chosen someone else, like somebody on staff there, or somebody that looked religious or something, and or somebody dressed better than she was. And I learned a lot from that. And everybody's important to God and to you, to life. And so I'm holding this little thing and this little rose in my hand. I said, well, this is not mine. I started getting emotional. She looked at me like Shirley Temple would have done. She'd go, God told me to bring you that from my garden today, Mr. Dykes. And I said, yes. And I told the story about the rose and Heidi. And the night before, she says, well, that's nice. And just turned and walked away. Delighted but not surprised at all. And I was completely blown away. I was so surprised. And then when I got the rose home to Heidi, she jumped in the van before I even had a chance to get out of my van. She ran out in the driveway, jumped in the van, and gave me a big hug. And I reached over and I said, here's a present for you, Heidi. And she says, he brung it, didn't he? She knew what it was. And I can still hear Heidi. I can still hear her little voice. And she still sounds that way to me sometimes when she sings and when she talks. I can still hear her at 4. And now she's a nurse. She made it through school. And she's fixing to graduate in her master's now as a nurse anesthetist. She has people's lives in her hands every day. And she still loves white roses. And there's another little story for you. And that's why there's a white rose on all my guitars. And even on the orange one, it's a desert rose model, but you see the rose on the guitar. And even on the nylon, it had to have a rose on it. So this is the very first one right here. I sent it to the store today. I hadn't even seen it until tonight. This is white rose for Heidi. And people from everywhere in the world would come up and call her by name. And it was amazing, from the Japanese and all kinds of folks from the UK and from Germany and France. And they'd come up and give her a big hug. And she is just loved by so many people worldwide. And Taylor nabbed her and made her move to San Diego. And but now it's probably the best piece of equipment other than the board that you have anywhere. And I told Rupert Neve one time, I said, "Boy, you have cost me a lot of money through the years." Of course, I have a couple of Neve modules in my little studio. They came out of the old 1272s. And he says, "You know, Doyle, this is the same thing you have in your 1272, but miniaturized. But it's virtually the same design and that they have in their console." So that tells you anything. And you go try to find a piece of Neve equipment that has EQ on it, a preamp, you're going to pay as much as this guitar for it if it says Neve on it. And that's the amazing part of it. And now Taylor's making everything. They make the pickups. Hey, you know what? This is really cool too, because Lloyd Baggs and I are really close. Different. But he says, you know, they've gone through 20 years of problems and things since the beginning of this year. And he said, it's amazing what they've done. He said, they're building more pickups per day now than we are. Taylor is.
Well, our production is so big, and we are, but it's been a learning curve. And so for all you people who might have a Taylor guitar and want to know if this is going to be a retrofit, which is a question that comes up a lot, the first thing I say to you is that yes, we want to do that. We're not there yet. But one of the things that I understand we have to look at is that it has to be initially.
I'm overdriving your board, I think. Let me turn this down. Pardon?